Hello, everyone. It's so wonderful to see so many people here so Jim can give thanks to everyone tonight. No, hello, I'm Margot. I'm going to be the MC for the night. It is so thrilling to be in person and see so many wonderful, familiar faces with and without masks. I'm going to hand it over to Dean Hackney for a few remarks, and then we'll go on with our night. Thanks, Dean.
Terrific, terrific. Thanks. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. All right. Let's get excited. Let's get excited for Jim. He's someone to be excited about. All right. Well, we have a lot of folks who have a lot of good things to say about Jim, so I'll be brief. So when I was thinking about Jim and his legacy, three kind of words came to mind. Hello. Impact, innovation, and wisdom. So I think we all appreciate the impact. The impact is through the Poverty Law Clinic, leading our clinical education program, and being a tremendous teacher. So Jim has taught literally hundreds or thousands of students who he's directly impacted and who will be impacting the world for generations to come. And he's also impacted the lives through direct client services of literally thousands of people. So that's the impact. And then there's the innovation. So, as a budding administrator and someone always with a new idea, somewhat to the faculty chagrin sometimes. But even as an associate dean, I had this crazy idea of a wholly online Master of Legal Studies program. And you say, well, who's interested in teaching that? And the first person to raise his hand was Jim Rowan. And we created a course together, the Introduction to Legal Studies, wholly online. And it's the entire 1L curriculum. And what is it, 12 weeks, Jim? Yeah, we get it done. We get it done. So again, that's the innovation. But the reason why Jim wanted to be involved in that project, again, it was because of impact. Because when we sat down to talk about that program, the first thing Jim focused on was we would have the ability to deliver legal education and legal knowledge to a whole new cadre of individuals, and also offer opportunity to a whole new group of individuals. And I have to say, right, Jim, we've been successful. So as we speak, there are over 100 enrolled MLS students. So that's the impact, Jim. So we're going to continue with that. Jim continues to innovate in the clinical space. Although Jim is formally retiring at the end of the month, we have some plans for a little bit of, as Congressman Lewis would say, some good trouble with regard to innovation and clinical legal education. So hopefully more to come in that regard. Now, the summation here, the wisdom, I was like thinking there's something special about Jim, and it's like the way he talks and the impact of what he says to you and to a group. And I say, well, it's something I can't really encapsulate it, but it's a feeling. It feels different than when other people talk. And then it came to mind. I always claim Los Angeles as my hometown because it's glamorous, it's fashionable, and I kind of like to be that way. But really, my hometown and my roots are in Florida, West Palm Beach, and Tallahassee. And what Jim brings to mind is when I would be in conversation with my grandparents and what we refer to as aunties and uncles. And that's that type of wisdom, that kind of auntie and uncle type of wisdom. And the most affectionate way to term it is we say unc. And I want to sum up by saying, unc, well done and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, James, for the lovely introduction. Looking out at this group and knowing why you're here, the image that comes immediately to mind is from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. You remember when they're dragging the cart down the street? But I'm not dead. And the response, you remember the response? It's all right, you soon will be. Thank you for coming all. I'm not dead yet. I soon will be, but not yet. Look, there are thanks that go to everybody in this room. There's nobody here that I don't owe a debt to. There's some who are not here who've gone before us, to whom I also owe debts. I'm thinking particularly of Gary Bello and Clint Bamberger, my first mentors as clinicians in Jamaica Plain. I'm thinking too of Denise Carty Benea, who tried to teach me to be an anti-racist before anybody had even coined the term. I'm thinking about Hope Lewis, who gave me the honor of her friendship. For all the faculty who I've taught with, who are here still and who were here earlier, it was an honor, a privilege to serve with you and to learn from you. I could not have done it, would not have wanted to do it without you. I apologize for the times when my hubris and my ignorance failed to raise you up or held you back. Those are debts I can't repay, and I hope you'll forgive me for not even trying. Doing clinical work allowed me to try to reach people and to show them what we knew that might be helpful to them and to learn from them what we knew would be helpful to us. I've had the privilege of working with some really fine clinicians who taught me what I was able to learn from them. I'm thinking now about Claire Dalton and Lois Cantor, who started the Domestic Violence Institute on Harvard money. And about Margaret Lindauer, who still carries it on. I'm thinking about what an honor it has been to teach all these years with Wally Holohan, when I could drag him away from doing prisoners' rights to work on the poverty law clinic. I'm thinking about what Bruce Jacoby has done to build an intellectual property clinic for us, and what Margaret Burnham has done in inventing, creating out of whole cloth, the Civil Rights and Restorative Justice Clinic, a star in the Northeastern firmament. I'm thinking too about the two new clinicians that are going to join us. That Darrell Walton will join us to run the community business clinic, and that Eva will join us to do a new housing justice clinic. There are some even of the clinic administrators who are here today, just to make sure that I retire. Pat Voorhees and Susan Verity, who are sitting back there together, who have left the university, and Raisha Price, who is still with the university serving on the board of trustees. But before I thank some of the people who have made the clinic vibrant through its connections to the community, I want to be certain to thank the people who are the love of my lives and the love of my life, and the most important people, my immediate and loving family. You get to see our daughter only occasionally, and only really if you stare at the bookshelf, that big, thick red volume, that's her doctoral thesis on neuroscience. You now know everything that I know about what's in that volume. She's in California and has apparently sent a videotape, which she has not allowed me to see. Brad, can you find it? More talent in the generation after than in the generation before. That's Magali and her children, Elio and Lola. The other of our children is here in the flesh. And you probably have seen Vincent around the campus from time to time. He did his undergraduate degree here. We used to play squash over there at Squash Busters. He then did a stint under Susan Verity and Pat Voorhees' direction in the clinics, and then transformed himself into an executive chef in New York. Vincent and his lovely wife, Allison, recently married in the backyard. But the person who insisted upon this reception, against my better judgment, I might add, is my loving wife, Lorenza Holt, and she gets the next word.
It's so easy during these dark times to become discouraged about the world and humanity. We look for the bright spots. How blessed am I that I can look no further than my beloved partner of 40 years, Jim. When I see the legacy of Jim's life work, my heart overflows with hope, pride, and gratitude. For Jim's legacy is the next generation of social justice warriors, hundreds of them across the country, with minds sharpened, skills honed, commitment deepened, because Jim was their mentor. Sometimes it can be hard to see the impact of our work, of our lives. In his characteristic humility, it might be easy for Jim to not take to heart just how transformative his impact has been. in individual lives, on the quality of legal education and legal services. The evidence is all around you, Jim. Take it in, believe it, know you are deeply loved. I love you and I thank you.
Kiss behind the screen. So there are two other folks who are almost members of the family on video link who I want to introduce you to. Cheryl Gooding, the first head of the staff union at Greater Boston Legal Services, who's on video, I hope, and Phyllis Freeman, an alumnus of the law school and who I've known since my days in North Carolina. Phyllis is a minor fugue in our lives. She found me my first job in Massachusetts. She introduced me to Northeastern Law School. She found us a house and she loans us her apartment in Paris. Other than that, we owe her nothing. As Lorenza said, these are kind of dark days and there are many reasons to lose faith and become discouraged, but I've invited a bunch of folks here today with whom I've worked and many of you have worked to remind us of the hard times that we've survived and the skill that we've built for that survival and that we have made and will continue to make some progress. The list of the invitees to and their connection to my community is such that I can only give you a taste of who they are and what they've done. I've handed out some certificates to some of them to signify a little bit of what it is, but we're going to talk about them a little bit and not much about the podium teaching that the University, the law school was kind enough to let me do for a few years, because I want to talk about what the university does with and in the community, because it seems to me that that's where my heart really lies and where the work really is most significant. The bedrock of the clinic, though, has been individual representation in service to that community. And the sources of those individual clients have come largely from Greater Boston Legal Services and the folks who work there. Legal Services in Massachusetts is supported statewide, though, by the Massachusetts Law Reform Institute, where Lucy and I worked before we came to the law school. And the three individuals who signify that work for me are Monica Hallis, who headed the employment unit, Melanie Malherbe, who still heads the welfare unit, and Pat Baker, who runs the coalition, particularly on food stamps and what is now called the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. Those two programs, Mass Law Reform and GBLS, are tied together at the hip. And there's a book's worth of information that I'd love to share with you about all the good work that they do and the creative way in which they use litigation and legislation and negotiation to accomplish the goals of the communities that they serve so well. I've asked them each to speak in alphabetical order. And so I think that what that means is that we'll hear from Melanie and then Monica and then Pat. They're all remote.
Thank you, Jim. I met Jim at the end of a training we did at GBLS back in the 90s about the draconian welfare reform rules. Jim immediately came up and introduced himself and offered the clinic's help to take welfare cases. For decades now, this has been an utter godsend, to put it mildly. The arcane area of welfare law and practice is really hard to do during a school quarter. Jim ended up fully handling a lot of the cases between clinic sessions. But you may not know that Jim also brought his thespian talents to the battle against the one-size-fits-all welfare reform. He worked with me and a few welfare recipients from Dorchester in going out to community colleges and doing role plays as part of welfare rights outreach. I wish I had a video of one of these. Jim was supposed to play the welfare worker, but we had to switch him to the advocate. He just couldn't turn off his empathy and kindness. In addition to brilliant and dedicated, Jim is a true mensch. Thank you.
Unmute. Hey,
So
Margaret, you're on
sorry.
mute.
So sorry. Can you hear me now?
Sure
Yes.
can.
Okay. 5 hallmarks of leadership include that you challenge the process, envision the future, model the way, enable others to act, and encourage the heart, all of which perfectly describes Jim. Jim, for your inspirational leadership and for your incredible service to GBLS clients, students, and our advocacy initiatives, we all thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Jim, I started at Western Mass Legal Services in 1977. You started at Mass Law Reform in 1978. I put myself through college, never went through law school, still haven't achieved that. Was too much in debt with college. But you wrapped around me and all the other non-lawyer advocates around the state. You encouraged us, inspired us to do advocacy, legislative policy work, organizing that was so powerful and welcoming. You were never elitist. You were always supportive. You made a huge difference to the paralegals and policy advocates in the state. And I think because of you, even though you left Mass Law Reform in 1980, I knew it was the place that I was willing to work and commit my life to, and to the welfare advocacy. I have loved working with your law students. I have loved working on cases with you and the mutual respect that we have without having to show credentials at the door. I can't tell you how much you've influenced my life and my work decisions. Thank you.
It's a special team, and the work that those folks at GBLS and Mass Law Reform have done to make the state a safer, better, and more just place is both remarkable and ongoing. The cases are one thing. The resolution of the cases quite a different thing. For the last decade plus, the clinic has worked largely in administrative law. I'm not sure that I see her here, but the work at the DUA, at the Division of Unemployment, the Department of Unemployment Assistance, has been greatly enhanced by the quality of the people who do the judging. And the same has been true at the Department of Transitional Assistance, that although the rules are unfair, the people who apply the rules have tried to be fair, have tried to be just. And it has made a huge difference to have the quality of the judging such that you could rely on the students learning what justice looks like when it is applied fairly, even if the rules that they're applying are not fair. And so I wanted to shout out to the 2 folks who have directed that operation, to Jeannie Pena, who has been the director at hearings, and Colin Connor, Director of Hearings at Unemployment, and Colin Connor, who's been the Director of Hearings at DTA. In the decade that Northeastern ran its clinical programs jointly with Harvard, we were capable to begin the practice of supporting effective community organizations. The first that's represented here tonight was the Coalition for Basic Human Needs. And the coalition was an active and aggressive source of inspiration and hard work in defense of and in support of the women, largely who were on welfare at that time. But in particular, what at the point when we entered work with the Coalition for Basic Human Needs, it was coming to understand the growth and possibility of the newcomers from Central and South America. And the leader of that organizational effort was Jeanette Hueso, who ran the community organizing efforts for the Coalition for Basic Human Needs. She continues that work today now as the executive director of United for a Fair Economy. There was a colleague of hers and of ours who ran the community organizing efforts for the East Boston Ecumenical Community Council, Juan Layton. Juan is with us remotely and is now the director of organizing for the community business. Let me get this straight. Hang on a sec. National Community Reinvestment Corporation, where Juan Layton has been working now for a number of years as their organizing director. They're doing hard jobs now, but they were doing impossible jobs when we worked together. And it was only their goodwill and maybe their naivete that allowed us in to work with them. Those of you who do any work with community organizers know that they have a proper suspicion of lawyers, and it was only because of their real desperate need and our novice status that allowed us in. But let me stop talking about them and let you hear from them. Jeanette.
Thank you so much. There are a quote that always remind me, Jim, that I'm pretty sure you will recognize. I learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. That was exactly Jim. Yes, I was working for the Coalition for Basic Human Needs 28 years ago. I was recent coming to United States for political reasons, and I was having really limited English. Welfare, have no idea what it was because in El Salvador it doesn't exist. So Jim and Mary Quinn, which was the director, they were talking, that I need a training. I was an organizer and now I need to become an advocate, especially for the Latino community. So Jim matching me with one of the best students that I have been working for all of this time. She was taking the patient to training me about what is welfare reform, what are the rights. Oh boy, I got it. And how much trouble I did at the DTA office. Uh, and he did it because he knew that I was struggling. And this person was having limited Spanish, but she made it. And Jim is one of the few people that have been touching my life. And now I'm here because he believed in me. Because it'll be easy, like, hey, she can be by herself. But he take me on his arm and prepare me for what I'm doing now. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks for coming. And I think remotely, can we find one lady? No? Well, you'll have to believe me that that the East Boston Ecumenical was struggling around housing issues and employment issues. One was their lead organizer and a real force in the East Boston community at that point, and was like Jeanette, willing to take us in and to let us learn at their lessons about how the community needed, what the community needed, and how to be responsive to the community in a way that was meaningful and helpful to them. As a newcomer to Boston back in those days, I needed a lot of help. And some of the help came because I got introduced through a series of good luck lessons to a tribe of ex-Peace Corps veterans and labor organizers. And through that, I came to know Randy Albelda. Randy organized anybody, anytime, but largely around intellectual issues and from her strength, understanding the economy and particularly the politics of the economy. She organized a group that met for years and was the source for me of a lot of my understanding both of Boston and of how the community worked, called the Academic Working Group on Poverty. And when I reminded Randy of it, she is such a good file keeper that she found the original purpose documents and sent them to me. Let me see if I can find this quote. "We see our role as working to assist and support broader groups of poor people, advocates, and other concerned folks. Confronting poverty also means confronting continuing elements of racial, ethnic, gender, and age exclusion from jobs, housing, and other resources. Those of you who are not fortunate enough to have a Randy in your lives are poorer for it. You can, of course, organize such a group yourself, but you'd have to know a lot more than I do about the resources and people available to get that done." Let me turn the mic over to Randy for a moment.
Thanks, Jim. And I know I only have a minute to torture you by telling you how much we love you and how you've enriched our lives. I've had the pleasure of knowing Jim as a personal friend. I found out from Vincent 32 years because I remember meeting Jim when Vincent was 2. And also through the Academic Working Group, which is emblematic of how Jim works, which is across the aisle. Across the aisle disciplinarily, across the aisle in terms of people who are working on this and institutions. I did look up this Academic Working Group on Poverty because I'm not a very good file keeper, but I don't throw anything out electronically or personally. So I was able to find some of this stuff. And the group of academics from over a dozen universities met for 5 or 6 years. It was during welfare reform. And the document is actually pretty remarkable. It's still, unfortunately, it's still incredibly relevant. But the idea was to use our, quote, to use our knowledge and commitment to inform the public debate with the goal that, quote, that as a society honestly attempting to eliminate poverty rather than containing, punishing, or ignoring those in poverty. And I would say that's how Jim's used his voice for a very, very long time. Unfortunately, you're retiring before we've done much about poverty. And I don't think that's right. Although I retired last year. So all you welfare warriors out there, there's still plenty of work to do. But my wish for you, Jim, is much like Magali's, which is that I hope you enjoy the luxury of the time that you now have.
Thanks so much. Special people. I mentioned Hope Lewis earlier. For those of you who were not privileged to know her, Hope was a force of nature, a leader in the struggle for economic and social rights at home and abroad, the author of the first text that I know of on the subject of human rights on the social and economic sphere. Hope was blessed with an organizer's instinct and a matchmaker's insight. Hope introduced me to cooperative economics for women and its genius lead organizer, Rebecca Johnson. Rebecca taught anyone who would listen that women can gain economic independence by forming worker-owned cooperatives and can learn the lessons to succeed using the insights of popular education. Students exposed to those twin lessons were never the same. I was never the same. Rebecca's here remotely. Rebecca.
I'm so happy that I can be here. I apologize for the informal apparel. I am 6 hours ahead of you all at a conference, and but I had to be here to both honor Jim and to honor the connection that Hope made for us. One of my fondest memories of our work together, Jim, is standing with you in the immigrant business district in Revere, and I think it was raining, preparing through an interpreter to read and explain documents to Cambodian folks we were organizing with, documents they had received in the mail. I learned so much from you and have always been humbled that you entrusted some of your students' education to us at Cooperative Economics for Women. And because of you, the work they did with us was excellent. And I tried to emulate your example when I was teaching. I taught at Sarah Lawrence College's health advocacy program. And we set up internships for students to assist environmental and racial justice organizations in Southwest Louisiana and Mississippi. And we modeled what we did after what I had learned from you and the Poverty Law Clinic. Those health advocates are your students as well. I look forward to seeing you in person and in your coming much deserved leisure time. Thanks so much.
And thank you so much, Rebecca. When Rebecca moved home to Cincinnati, we discovered the Union of Minority Neighborhoods and the struggle over CORI and the expungements that were authorized by statute. We've been working with a number of veterans organizations and struck by the fact that the veterans were having enormous trouble both with housing and employment because of some old and some small criminal offenses that were on their record and holding them back. And there was Horace out trying to get the legislation passed, and once it was passed, trying to get it enforced. Horace was generous with his time and with his insights, and seemingly delighted to have student help to spread the work and to build the organizational structure. The clinic continued to work with the union after the CORI enforcement practice ended through a number of campaigns. One, to rein in gun manufacturers, dismal failure. And to stop Boston's bid for the Olympics, a success. When he retired to Paris last year, the Globe identified him, I think correctly, as one of the best organizers in Boston. Have we got Horace? We've
Yeah.
got him. All right, Horace.
Yo, man. Oh, hey, Jim. How you doing, bro?
Yo.
Yo. Look, one of the things, family, that I love, I consider Jim and I would say we're very close. We were pretty close. We would regularly, besides talking about issues, he was a social justice geek, just like I am. He believed that, decency and simple human justice is what every human being believed. And so we naturally clicked. And in our meetings, talking about what can we do together, we would probably spend a lot of time bullshitting about life and what's going on in the world. And I have to say, my dear friend, that's one of the things that I miss living here. But that's why I'm very happy to say, if you and as we say in French, la femme, or your wife, happen to make it to the most beautiful city on earth, I got to tell you, my friend, Sue and I have something for you to do. We're going to take you to the finest restaurant. We're going to show you around. We're going to show you the love that you deserve. Because what's going on today, Jim, even though you're retiring, you're getting all this love from everybody who's sitting in the room, who's on the, who's on this call. And yeah, even though it's 6 hours, it's a 6 hour time difference, the door is always open to you. I just want to thank you, my friend. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the things that we were able to do together, for always having an open door, for always being available to the community when we needed you. Because, community-based organizations don't have money to do the kind of research that we need to do when we have to get deep on issues. You were there for us, and we're there for a lot of other organizations. And I know I've spent more than a minute of my time, but I just want to tell you, I love you, man. Come on to Paris. Let's have a good time. Let's have a glass of iced tea. What do you say? Thank you, my friend, for everything.
Thank you, Horace. The invitation is not general. The invitation's for us.
Yes, exactly.
Lucy Williams insisted that we have some kind of a reception here and now insists that she get the mic. So she gets the mic.
Jim, I've known you for probably close to 45 years. Since we worked together at Mass Law Reform Institute, it's lovely to see many of my friends here and on Zoom. Now, everybody's saying wonderful things about Jim tonight. I have to tell you, Jim can be a real curmudgeon. Now, that's to his credit. He can be a curmudgeon in the fight for justice. He can also be a real curmudgeon personally on occasion. And one of the reasons I just experienced it was when I had to practically chain him to the chair to say that we were going to have this event tonight, because he was going to have none of it. But Lorenza, thank you so much for helping me get him here tonight. And the only way we got him here was because we said he could take this evening to thank people that he wanted to thank, instead of us telling him how wonderful he was. Well, Jim, we fooled you. So, Jim, I want to say to you, in these 45 years that I've known you, I have watched in awe. Honey, you got to hear me. Your vision, your passion in fighting for equality and the dignity of poor people that you know you and I care about so desperately. Your incredible dedication to teaching our students. I've been challenged by you to think creatively about the law, and to never let setbacks, and you know we've had them over the years, keep me and you from pushing the rock of justice up that oh so steep hill. I'm very proud to call you my dear friend.
You introduce Larissa? You introduce Larissa here?
Oh, no, you want me to introduce Larissa? I will. I now want to introduce Larissa Zare, who is a recent graduate 2-3 years ago from Northeastern Law School, who was honored to be in the Poverty Law Clinic. Larissa, are you on the Zoom now? Hello, Larissa. It's wonderful to have you here.
Hi.
Can you say a few words about Jim?
Yes, it's so wonderful to be here. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. But I was grateful to work with Jim, with Professor Rowan, right before I began practicing. And I just want to say thank you. I think what stands out to me the most is how Jim welcomed all of us as our full selves. The legal field can be a really alienating place. And in that space, he taught me to trust my own humanity and to move at the speed of relationship with each other and with our clients. Jim's first question to community members is, what brings you here today? And that opens us up to really listening and responding to the harm and the need for justice from our neighbors. And it also gave space for us to feel outrage and fear about the destructive systems we're up against, and more importantly, connection and hope about what is possible. And I think hearing all of you today, and in my experience too, it's clear that Jim really understands the stakes and how we cannot miss the moment. He's fought for justice alongside communities for decades, and he welcomed his students, us, with wisdom and mentorship into that fight. That work takes deep reflection and careful practice. And above all, Jim is rigorous and disciplined in his teaching. He taught me that putting myself to service for the movement is something I must do in every facet of my work. He showed me how to be transparent and accountable in seemingly small but critical ways. Everything from how we counsel clients about the limitations of the law, to how we're transparent about our values, to how we make sure community members have decision-making power over our work. Jim, you really embody praxis, or the relationship between theory and practice. It's hard to bend legal tools with their limitations and their power to our radical theories of change. That's a challenge. You gave us that challenge. And you gave me tangible tools to live in that space and helped me see I can bring my whole self to the work. Thank you for teaching me and for teaching all of us.
Thank you so much, Larissa. You make it easy to do. Thanks. In more recent years, we were able to serve a number of other organizations. We got to work with the Chinese Progressive Association for a year. Karen Chen allowed us to interview their walk-in clients, let us work on a range of legal problems, including trying to clarify how zoning rules would govern a planned hotel development in the neighborhood, and to provide in-house training for the organizing staff on some of the interactions of immigration and benefits. The Chinese Progressive Association is a vibrant, powerful community organization that continues to serve both as an ethnic and geographical powerhouse in the bulwark against institutional expansionism. Karen.
Thank you, Jim. Well, I think the first time I was in front of like a room full of lawyers, raise your hand if you're a lawyer. Okay, yeah, you can say room full of lawyers, right? Was actually a training. I was a very new organizer. My mentor, Cindy Mark, was like, tell us, how do you work with lawyers? So I said, we use lawyers. We use lawyers for organizing to fight for justice. And So when I first met Jim, I actually was reminded that, when I did the training, because Jim was very willing, was like, hey, what do you guys need? What do you want? What can we do for you? And, it was lots of things that we presented. We're like, okay, it's an offer, right? And, and I think that, as organizers, when we fight, for justice, we really need good lawyers. And we have, someone like Jim. He doesn't only bring all of his students along with us. So I want to thank you, and thank you for your patience, because, we are very impatient people. Organizers are very impatient. We're very demanding. And so thank you. And thank you for inviting me here, and also continue to work, with the community. And you're really important part of our fight. And happy retirement.
Thank you so much, Shannon. Thanks for coming.
Oh, and thank you for the certificate.
Oh, well, you have to have a certificate.
Next time I need a certificate, I'll call you up.
Yeah, right. Actually, you better call Lorenza. I didn't have anything to. One of the other community organizations that we got to work with came to us through the insight and prior work of Lily Ibarra, who had worked with Green Roots, and who, while serving as the director of our Center for Public Interest, Advocacy, and Collaboration, was kind enough to take on working with the clinic and some of the students who wanted to explore what this concept of movement lawyering might mean in practical terms. And so Lily tried to help us to figure out what the intersection was between the theory and the practice of working with a community organization. Green Roots is a vibrant place where they are trying to figure out what the environmental justice movement would mean for Chelsea, Massachusetts. And Lily was instrumental in introducing us to that work. Lily?
Thank you. A few days ago, Jim sent out this email about speaking at this event. It was a very funny, self-deprecating email, and I thought if I ignored it, then I wouldn't have to speak at this event. But it was an opt-out email, as it turned out. But as always, Jim was right, so I'm glad to be here. I don't normally enjoy public speaking, but it's an honor to be here for Jim. Before I met Jim, I knew him by reputation. My colleagues in legal services who really valued warmth and caring to clients said Jim was the best. My colleagues in legal services who value meticulous attention to detail, some of whom are up there, said we really love Jim. And the ones who really thought progressive and radical politics were the most important thing said Jim is the best. And they were all right. At first I thought that Jim must be kind of bland and must just agree with everyone. But that's not true. When I got here, I realized Jim's superpower is showing you talents in yourself that you hadn't realized. Jim asks you a question and you spit out a lot of stuff, and he comes back and he goes, and then he tells you the smart thing you accidentally said in the midst of all of that. So despite what he said about not being into neuroscience and not having read that dissertation, which you can read during retirement, you are truly a scientist who thinks about another experiment, is open to trying something else, says, I'll try this thing, I'll try a pilot, we'll try to work with Green Roots and see what's gonna happen. You've illustrated for me what it's like to learn from your career and be wise and have some skepticism, but not cynicism. So thank you and congratulations on your graduation from NUSL.
Took 42 years to get out of here. All right. So that's the community in which we work, and the community that we hope that you all will continue to serve. But there's a community of academics that is also part of the story of how the clinic has functioned. And one of the most heartfelt and heartwarming experiences that I had was to work with my colleagues at BU and BC in an effort to try to figure out how to make the clinics work to inspire people to do lawyering that would bridge the gap. It came out of work that had been started by our former dean, David Hall. David Hall knew instinctively during his period of his deanship that individual representation was critical, but that groups would need to be able to get some help in order to function properly. And he started the first here, an institute that was devoted to doing that kind of social justice work. And then with 3 other deans from around the country, talked the Soros Foundation into funding the initial effort to build a legal incubator, on a movement which has gone national and now international. And fresh from the Virgin Islands, I think we've got Dean, now President of the University of the Virgin Islands, David Hall.
Thank you, Jim, and good evening to everyone there. I was really moved to be summoned by Jim to be here. I, like everyone else, was told that I had a minute to share my remarks. Sharing thoughts about Jim Rowan and his contributions in 1 minute is like having to describe a magnificent sunrise or sunset in 1 word. It can be done, but it does not do justice to the natural phenomenon. And Jim is a natural phenomenon. And I would like to reflect more personally than institutionally. Jim touched and impacted my life from the moment I first interviewed with Northeastern Law School in 1985. I distinctly remember the interview, not because of his questions, but because of his genuine and passionate interest in me that was so obvious. That is how he made his students and clients feel as well. As a new faculty member, he invited me to participate in a consulting project with the Attorney General's Office of the State of New York, which allowed me to share my skills in a different arena, though Lucy and I will probably regret that we ever agreed to work with Jim on that project. When the law school was creating a position for an associate dean of academic affairs, Jim showed up in my office, planting a seed that I should apply for the position, which I did, and I put my toe in the waters of academic administration for the first time, and I have been swimming in those waters ever since. 5 years later, I passed Jim's office and saw him and Dan Gavelber having an intense conversation. Jim invited me in, and they both informed me that Dan had decided to step down as dean. They both, but especially Jim, looked at me the way a coach does to a player on the bench when a player on the floor is injured. In essence, he said, "You're up next, so get in the game." I did apply for the deanship of Northeastern Law School, and I believe that those years helped shape me and shape the social justice commitment of Northeastern in a significant way. I share these stories to make the point that some people talk diversity, but Jim lived it. Some people say they believe in you and want you to succeed, but Jim did that in my life. He planted seeds in the soil of my mind and soul that altered my career path and allowed me to contribute at a different level. So Jim is like a sunrise and a sunset. He shines brightly and he is so consistent. You can depend on him every day. He not only plants seeds of hope and possibilities, but he waters them with his words, with his care, with his passion. Thanks, Jim, for being there for me and for being what you have been to so many clients and students, which is a living example that change, justice, and compassion can walk the earth. Thank you, Jim, for walking the earth.
David, your certificate is in the mail. The check will follow later. Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
The seed that I was talking about that David sowed when he talked the Soros Foundation into the notion that it was possible to imagine young lawyers serving the access to justice gap, and that somehow the law schools could be instrumental in helping to train them and support them in that work, was an idea whose time had not come at that point. We tried it again as an instrument of change during the economic downturn. And we were very, very fortunate to have partners at Boston College and Boston University. From Boston University, Bob Burdick, who served as well at Northeastern Law School as a teacher of negotiations, and Paul Tremblay from BC, who has been a model for us in many regards, including running the community business clinic, which for reasons which I will not go into at great length, is also a personal family favorite of ours, since he represented my wife in a community enterprise nonprofit that she formed to our heart's desire until it broke our hearts later. A story for another day. But what we were able to try at that level was, I think, a model of a community pulling together from various sources of institutional strength to try to build something to solve a real world problem. And Paul was a mainstay of that whole operation. And I'd like to turn the mic over to him for a minute.
Wow, thank you, Jim. Hi, everybody. I'm so honored to be here. So I've known Jim for a really long time as a clinical teacher when I was doing litigation at Boston College Legal Assistance Bureau, and Jim was doing it here. But I only really got to work with him closely when we had this brilliant idea to develop the Lawyers for Affordable Justice that Jim was just describing. And the idea was to get recent grads we have a mentorship, an incubation project, where we would work with them for a couple of years for people who wanted to graduate from Boston College or Boston University or Northeastern, and would then serve low and moderate income clients, and we would mentor them and incubate them. It was a great idea, and we worked. So Bob Burdick, the late Bob Burdick, and Jim and I, along with Natasha Thomas and Sarah Schindel, and Sophia Lingos, who's here, and with Raisha helping us, we met week after week after week after week for like a year and a half to develop this really brilliant program. And we got space on ComAv and in Kenmore Square for this incubator to start. And here's the one thing that relates to Lucy's, or Lucy went, her comments. So we would be working, and we always met here. It was before Zoom, so we met in person. And we would, it was just relentless how much work we needed to do to get things going. And we would, and Sophia would probably agree with this, that there were times when the group of us would feel like, okay, we've got one of the strategies together. We're really ready to move on to do something. And then Jim would pipe up and say, wait a minute, let me just ask a couple of questions about that. And he raised some really perfectly good points that, oh, we have to go back and rethink it. And he was just like tireless about wanting to continue to do this until we got it right. And we got it right. We had this brilliant program that looked beautiful. Turns out it didn't work at all. We misread the market for graduates of those schools who wanted to do this kind of work. But LHA existed for 2 years in Kenmore Square. We served a lot of clients and mentored a bunch of lawyers. It made me feel like an entrepreneur because we tried something, this idea of the scientist, that he likes to take chances and try things. And it was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. And Jim was really the leader of this. So Jim, thank you so much for being part of that, and enjoy your retirement. Thanks.
I think Paul described better than I could have what we tried to do and what we almost got done. It did get done, though, and Sophia Lingos is part of the way it got done with a wonderful acronym. The organization was known as SOS, Starting Out Solo. And Starting Out Solo did, on a shoestring, what Paul and Bob and I tried to do with all the planning and thinking and hard work that Paul has described for you. What Sophia has brought to SOS was the passion and experience of actually being an entrepreneur, of actually doing the work. And she has brought the same thing to Northeastern and to the effort to train people in law practice management. For that, I'll be forever grateful. Sophia?
Thank you. One of Jim's many superpowers is this ability to, by working with an individual, by inspiring and mentoring an individual, to have this ripple effect where that reach that he has, and there's been many of those individuals as we see here tonight, is just felt be above and beyond and just continues and continues on forever. I am very grateful to have been one of those individuals. We met back in 2009 at the height of the legal recession when Dean Spieler at the time introduced us to revive a practice management course. But Jim doesn't believe in reviving things. It's all about innovation. And it wasn't just about teaching students how to practice. It was how can we really understand and appreciate this access to justice initiative? How can we take this as a platform to not learn the business of law and the practice of law, but how we can analyze the market, understand opportunities, realize what value we have. And because of that curriculum that was created, he then has gone on, and now hundreds and hundreds of students have been inspired by this curriculum to really go out and not just practice law, but to understand the value and the opportunities and how they need to continue to serve. That's been seen in things like Starting Out Solo, which was there to actually help people who have just started a practice right out of law school, no practice experience previously before graduation, and then going into the practice of law, whether it was the incubator with Paul or all the different clinical things that we have seen. I really love the learning technique that Jim has taught me, where he asks a question and then another question, and really helps, like a lot of you have said today, you get to that point where you answer the question yourself. And so I always really try to employ that skill. I really embrace that analytical tool, WWJD. Are people familiar with that? What would Jim do? So it is a critical tool. And when I don't have the answer, I will be honest, I pick up the phone and say, what do I do? And so I promise to continue to do that. I'm not giving up with picking up the phone, but I promise to use my critical lens and continue to try and embrace this legacy, the advocacy, everything that you've taught me over the years. Truly, the world is a better place because you're here, and I am so grateful for everything you've done. Thank you.
One of the ways that clinicians get their work done is the resource in-house. And I've been blessed to have wonderful clinicians to work with. But I've had the added advantage of the New England clinicians that has kind of broadened the scope and permitted us to learn not just what we know in our own school, but what is known around the northeastern part of the United States. And as part of this theme of how communities get built and how they support each other, the person who held that organization together, who was the spark plug, the central hub for it, was our friend and partner, Russell Engler. And I'd like to give him the mic for just a minute.
Thank you so much, Jim. I'd like to say I'm grateful to be allowed to speak. I think I was summoned to speak, so I'm speaking under duress. I was lucky enough to cross paths with Jim through the connections with Gary Bello and Clinton Vanberger. Initially, he was legendary at the Legal Services Center when I was there. I went off to a career in legal services. When I came back to the New England area to start a career as a clinical teacher, I, of course, was desperate, not knowing what I was doing. So I reached out to whoever I could for help. And you'll be shocked to know not that Jim was always there. The one shocking thing I've heard today is I thought, and maybe I misheard it, that Jim apologized for his hubris and incompetence. So that had me thinking, because I don't think I know a more humble person who's as accomplished and generous and warm as Jim is. The idea of Jim and incompetent together is so mind-boggling that I was going to discount it. Except it turns out that although Melanie was unable to get him to play a caseworker because of his empathy, somehow through his collaboration with Harvard, they put together a trial training video of a landlord-tenant case to teach people good and bad lawyering. And they somehow hoodwinked Jim to play the role of the nasty landlord's lawyer. For those of you who need a visual, it's Jim in the upper right-hand corner. That's about the vintage. I just rewatched some of that before I came over here. I remember using it as a training vehicle because for those of you who know about teaching trial advocacy, there are the famous Irving Younger 10 commandments of cross-examination, everything you don't do. And there is Jim up there asking questions that violate all 10 commandments at once, leading to a spectacular failure. Now, I guess that could be incompetence, except of course it was Jim being gracious for the educational benefit of anybody who would watch that. And he was being a good sport. And it's amazing. If I were technologically savvy, I would have figured out how to put the video up here for you for a price. Maybe I can figure out how to help you all get access. It's really amazing. What I really think, though, is just listening to everybody, it is amazing how many incredible projects Jim was involved in, how grateful we all must be to him. It makes me look back and wonder all of my missed opportunities because I didn't get the chance to work as closely with Jim as I would have liked. And sure, I helped organize those meetings, but I was being selfish because I got to get Jim to the table and the Jim equivalents at other schools. It's an incredible community and we have a lot to learn. Jim, this is a well-earned retirement. I wish you all the best. Thank you for everything you've done.
Did you watch the film carefully enough to see who the witness was? That's the witness.
Is it really?
Yeah. That was Gary Bello at his worst. We were both employees of the Legal Services Center, Lorenza and I, and we got roped into
and Carol Bolger and Judge
right.
Smith. Brew versus Harris, everyone.
All right, we're almost done. We're almost done. But I have one special thank you to Rashmi Dial-Chan, who put together the clinic for the community business. The thing about clinics is that they were all about criminal law and legal services work. And we were missing an entire portion of our student body who wanted not to repair things that were broken, but to build things that were new, who wanted to do something transactional, who wanted to help build something. And for years, I'd been trying to get somebody who knew something about that, not me, to do something of the sort. And finally, Rashmi Dayal-Chan got tenure and was able to put together the community business clinic. And then later, and here is a real mistake, talk about multiple failures. She decided that she wanted to let me try to write a law review article with her. That's never going to happen again. But Rashmi is with us tonight. And where is she? There she is, Rashmi. Hey, my friend.
Thank you. Yes, that was a commitment I made more than 20 years ago when I walked in the door for an interview for a faculty candidate position, and Jim said, "When you get tenure, this is the plan." And indeed, it was a plan that I was honored to help fulfill. And I'm going to start in the same place by pausing for 1 minute, because it's all I have, per Jim's instructions, to say that if it's lucky enough an institution has an identifiable moral core, and ever since I walked in the door for that interview 20 years or more ago, Jim has embodied for me that moral core. He has, and I don't know if you know this, Jim, but he has been there for me. He has counseled me in the moments when I felt most vulnerable, when I felt that there really was no one else that I could trust to talk through a problem. He has celebrated with me my successes and supported me in my many failures. He has responded with genuine feedback to my silly questions, my misguided questions. And I say this now partly to embarrass you, but partly also because I have talked with so many students, alumni, staff, and faculty who have expressed similar sentiments about you, Jim. You have been, for so many of us, a mentor, a model, and a friend. And I'm well aware that one of your first projects after you retire is to make a quilt out of all your ties. And how could any of us begrudge that kind of an endeavor? I mean, it's fabulous. But I think I speak for everyone here in saying that we will miss you terribly. And in saying from the bottom of my heart, and I think from the bottom of all of our hearts, thank you so much for your innumerable contributions.
Thank you, my friend. All right, I'm almost done. That's the story I wanted to tell you. Those are the thanks I wanted to give. You can make of it as you will. What I make of it is that it matters what a law school does. It matters how we do it. It matters our connection to the community. It matters the people who we serve. But I'm done. I am turning the mic and the clinics over to Margot Lindauer, who will, I hope, get us home in time to eat dinner and watch the game.
So it feels like some of the words that I wrote have already been repeated, but we're not going to focus on that right yet. We all know that Jim is not fond of us celebrating him or talking about him publicly. So I'm going to spend my 3 minutes, because I get 3, talking about myself and maybe a little bit about Jim. I can promise everyone in this room that I've cried in Jim's office 100% more times than Jim has cried in mine. In fact, as I was writing these words down, I thought, I think it might be Jim and my anniversary. Maybe we've surpassed 15 years of me going into his office and crying. As I was in the poverty law clinic in the summer of 2005, which would make our relationship exactly 17 years old, not 15. Jim has taught me how to be a mentor and a guide, as he has been that for me for these last 17 years. He demonstrates through his actions and his intentional words, as have already been talked about, how the role of a mentor is ever changing. And for that, I will be forever in Jim's debt. As someone who struggled to find her place in law school, at this law school, and in my nascent career, Jim was always supportive. Not in a vapid, you can do anything, Margot kind of way, but in a very specific and practical, so what's your plan, Margot? How are you going to make it work? Which I would just talk to him and then somehow come up with a plan. When I had the guts early in 2008, I believe, to share with him that I really wanted to get into clinical teaching, he did not hesitate to support me. As I was applying for my first fellowship, he read my cover letter, he read my resume, and helped me prep for that very first interview. When I shared my intentions to go on the teaching market during my second teaching fellowship, Jim offered not only his support, keen eye, and thoughtful feedback on my first article, but he also offered his amazing wife as my doula and birth coach. It's not a joke. When I did not get a job on the teaching market the first time, he told me that something would eventually happen, and just to stay the course. And when I met with him for lunch one cold winter day in March of 2014, he cut to the chase after my feeble attempts to talk about the new MLS program and asked me when I was going to apply to the open position at Northeastern. At that point, my confidence had been rocked. I had not gotten a job my first time on the teaching market and was somewhat settled in a stable nonprofit management position. I ultimately did get the job and met him again for lunch at that very same Au Bon Pain a couple months later. And through tears of happiness and terror, I told him I was pregnant again and did not know what to do or who to say. And instead of responding in any way other than just sheer joy, he gave me an enormous hug and told me how ecstatic he was for me and Josh. I have shared tears of joy, heartbreak, fear, personal and professional losses in Jim's office. He truly and quite literally is always there and always has his door open. He believed in me before I could see the things in myself, and this is what I hope to pay forward in my life. In 2018, pregnant with my third and final daughter, Jim came into my office and told me that I was ready. Ready for what, I said. He said he was going to retire, but before he did that, he was going to step down from his clinical director position. Again, I looked at him, not knowing what to say. I still had no idea what was in his mind. And he said, Margot, it's your turn. You're ready to run the clinic. You will shadow me for a while when you get back from your parental leave, and please try to take it this time. And then it's your job. I was floored. I had no idea what to say. I was honored and terrified again. But this time I knew I could do it because Jim thought I could. I, like many of you are here tonight in person and online, am forever grateful for Jim's impact. Jim is my professional role model, colleague, and now dear friend. He has exemplified to me and to so many others what showing up actually means and how being quiet can be just as impactful as being loud. But he can also be loud when he has to be. And that's also been an incredible lesson. As my mom said when I told her Jim's retirement party was tonight, she said to me, please share with Jim that we will always appreciate the support he gave you to be a leader. But I think my mom's words are for everyone, that Jim's support has meant we all can be leaders and forge our own path. So for that, Jim, we're all so grateful. Three minutes. Okay. We have one final speaker, Professor Margaret Burnham.
Thank you, Margot. And I think I'm the only thing separating all of you from the meatballs and separating Jim from his dinner in Paris with Horace. So I too have a Jim story that I just must share with you. It's also a young and stupid story. There were four of us. Jim had just graduated from law school, as had I. The year was 1970. The war was raging. Civil rights were crescendoing. North Carolina was still in the grips of the post-segregation era. And Jim and I and two other newly minted lawyers decided that we would start a people's law office in Durham and Raleigh, North Carolina, 1970. Now, most of you probably don't know what a people's law office was or is, but it was a time when we decided that there was a form of practice that didn't take you to the ACLU or the LDF or any of the public interest law firms, and that wasn't a firm, but that was a private public practice. And we defined ourselves by, or we would have defined ourselves by how we picked our clients, by who we served, how we intended to serve, how we paid ourselves, very little, and how what our relationship was to litigation. We defined ourselves as non-elitist. We thought that those who were practicing in the big public interest firms of the time, LDF and the ACLU, were too wedded to the notion that lawyers are an elite group and that their main and most effective tool is litigation. So those were those were the forces against which we positioned sillily positioned ourselves back in 1970, and we would have launched. There was a problem, however. Two of us were ineligible for admission to the North Carolina bar. Small problem. Neither of us, the two of us, the four, were not residents. I was a resident of New York, and one of our group was a resident of Michigan. And Jim said, no problem, we'll file a lawsuit. And we did. And we won the lawsuit. And we beat down the residency requirement of North Carolina at the time. As fate would have it, the law firm never went anywhere. Jim moved on, and I moved on to a case in California. But the conversations that we had then as brand new lawyers, 6 months, 1 year out of law school, about what it meant to practice law, what it meant to serve justice, what it meant to work for poor people, what it meant to be a different kind of lawyer, what it meant to practice not just for those who were demonstrating, but to be part of the demonstration. The conversations that all of us had, the dreams we had, the imagination we had about the nature of our practices, I think that those have stuck with us for 52 years. I would meet Jim next when I thought about becoming a member of this faculty. And I'm only here because of Jim Rowan. It was Jim who encouraged me, and Dan. A nod to Dan. It was Jim and Dan who told me, okay, you can do this. You can make it work. And it's a good thing to do. Jim kept that North Star that we imagined and we breathed into as lawyers back in 1970 for 52 years. He let it guide him. And all of us who practiced with him, all of us who love him, all of us who were his clients and who have been his colleagues are the beneficiaries, not just of his humility, but of his indomitable commitment, of his friendship, and of his commitment to those dreams and ideas we had about how to be lawyers for the people in 1970. Jim, we love you, we respect you, and we wish you all the best in your retirement, and we all want a piece of the quilt. Thank you so much.